Let's continue to unpack the story now. Joining us is Andrew Mews. He is the Executive Director at Doctors Without Borders Southern Africa. Andrew, a warm welcome to the program. Thanks for coming on. A ceasefire deal hailed by world leaders, and yet over the past 12 hours, even more, Israel stepping up attacks in the Gaza Strip.
Yes, of course. So from us in Doctors Without Borders, we welcome the move to a ceasefire. But as you just said, it's not implemented yet. It's expected to take a few days before we see that implementation. And this isn't yet the end of the conflict or some of the attacks and very brutal attacks that we've seen on the Gaza Strip over the past 15 months.
Yeah, in fact, Al Jazeera reporting just over the past half hour or so that the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, has held up a cabinet vote on the ceasefire. Lots of celebrations we're seeing, not only in the Gaza Strip, but in many quarters of the world at the announcement of the ceasefire deal, but perhaps these celebrations are premature.
Possibly. It's difficult for us to say. We are working there on the ground in central and southern Gaza. We hope, of course, that it's a move in the right direction.
Yeah.
But to be honest, it's hard to celebrate anything over the last 15 months where we've seen, over 100,000 people injured, nearly 45,000 Palestinians killed in the last 15 months. So difficult to celebrate, to be honest.
Certainly. All of that life lost, so many families, so many generations of families wiped out over the past 15 months, Andrew. The work that Doctors Without Borders have been doing over the past 15 months in the Gaza Strip, what is the situation there now, and how much work are you actually able to do? How much life-saving work?
It's extremely difficult, to be honest. It has been since the beginning of the crisis. I completely agree with the UN Secretary General, who was in your report earlier. The humanitarian situation has reached catastrophic levels. Doctors Without Borders has been able to be present throughout the last 15 months, but only actually in southern and central Gaza. We've had no access to northern Gaza for a long time now. Actually, one of the things we wish to call for as part of this ceasefire is to immediately allow safe access for Doctors Without Borders and other humanitarian actors to reach northern Gaza. There is much work to be done there if we want to stop lives being lost even in the coming days. But just to say that,
yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, please finish your thought, Andrew.
No, just to say, the amount of work we've been able to do is not enough. I mean, just to be clear, whilst we've had a presence, we've been able to bring in a level of supplies, of medical supplies, a level of international humanitarian expertise. Actually, the land borders remain closed. We need Rafah opening immediately. We need a surge of humanitarian aid into the country. And we need to be able to do our job in a safe manner.
Yeah. And we've seen this before, right? We've seen this before in situations where ceasefire agreements are reached, and sometimes they don't last. That must be a fear for organizations like MSF as well.
It's, of course, a fear. This has been a very complex conflict over the last 15 months. There's been moments of hope before that we were close to a ceasefire. We didn't see it. This is the first time, really, it's been announced. And with the change of administration in the US, it's presumably one of the reasons why there's been another push now. We do hope it stands, but it's only a respite. We really need the ceasefire to be sustained. The people of Gaza deserve that, and we really need this conflict to come to an end.
Certainly. Andrew, the extent of the aid that now needs to pour into Gaza come Sunday, and if everything does go according to plan, what does that even look like? I mean, you've talked about the border in Rafah being opened, allowing that humanitarian aid to flood into Gaza. But I imagine that the need there is so great, even beyond what any of us can understand.
It really is. I mean, MSF has been working for over 50 years in many conflicts around the world. This has been one of the most difficult contexts to work in. We have not been able at all to reach the level of quality healthcare that we're used to giving in many conflicts around the world, simply because we can't get resources or people or supplies into the Gaza Strip. We really need thousands of tons of humanitarian aid coming in. This includes medical aid, so that we can get the hospitals back up and running. At the moment, there's only 17 hospitals partially running out of a total of 36. There's been over 590 attacks on healthcare facilities over the last 15 months, which has left healthcare in a dire state. Women to give birth in a facility is almost unheard of at the moment. So you've got immediate life-saving aid, getting food into people to stop the malnutrition, but also treating war wounded. But you've got the chronic aid that needs to come in, just allowing women to give birth in a facility that's safe, that is able to save their lives and the lives of their children. This all has to be rebuilt, which is an enormous task.
Where does one begin to rebuild the life of a family who has not only lost everything, but possibly lost everyone?
No, I think it's a question that, as any human being listens to and struggles to give a real answer. Where does one begin? We, as a medical humanitarian organization, we will start in the health facilities. We will try and open up a level of access to care that, first of all, stops the immediate mortality of people, then starts to look at some of those more long-term health issues, but also starts to look at mental health. I mean, the mental trauma of many of these teenagers, adolescents, young people that have seen a horrific war for the last 15 months. It's going to be a long haul just for medical actors. But when you talk about rebuilding families, I mean, this is where we really need the international community to step up, put money into rebuilding Gaza and making it a place for dignity where Palestinians can continue their lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is beyond the scope of what any of us can understand, right? Unless you are living in Gaza, unless you have lived through the past 15 months, there's no real understanding of the situation in Gaza. So, Andrew, when you talk about, on the one hand, getting the logistics in place, if indeed everything goes according to plan by Sunday and the ceasefire is implemented by Sunday, getting that medical care in, getting supplies and humanitarian aid in, when you talk about that kind of mental health support, I imagine the scope of that has to be so incredibly broad. What other organizations outside of MSF would be involved in that?
Well, you're right. It's extremely broad. Of course, we've got the United Nations is a big player when it comes to humanitarian response. You'll see a number of international and actually local NGOs from the region that will engage. And this is actually why we need land borders opening and safe passage to be assured for humanitarian actors. It's been extremely difficult to work there during the conflict. With this ceasefire, it gives some breathing space to bring in extra people and supplies. But actually, it's not yet a final ceasefire. It's not the end of the conflict as it stands. It's merely a respite. We need that ceasefire sustained.
Yeah, absolutely. Andrew Mews, let me thank you for your time this afternoon. Andrew's the